you know, the way this model is painted, those are the colors that we use to paint, you know, the real McCoy.
Right, so they can actually get documented off of the model, and then by the time we're installing the final sets and painting them, we already know what colors we need to paint them.
Well, one thing people might not know is at Imagineering, when we build our models, especially the 1 inch to a foot model, the scale model of that size, which is quite large. If you see on the bottom left photograph, you see a black band. What that is actually the model itself is built up high on tables, and each scene or parts of scenes are on rollers, so you can kind of put them together as a puzzle and pull them apart. But where the ride path is, where the ride vehicle goes, actually is a slot, and it's built at eye length, so the model actually sits this high when you're standing, so your eyes, as you can walk through the whole model and see at the same, you know, level as you will when you're sitting in a vehicle in real space. So that allows you, you know, it's one thing to look down on a model, but we understand that you really have to be in it because there's so many things you don't see if you're just looking down on the model. So we actually get in the model ourselves, and when you walk through, you can see everything that, that the guest is eventually going to see.
And it's far easier to change it when it's in model form than when it's in the field. So.
Yes, it is.
But these particular scenes here, you'll remember now, we have Ariel's grotto under the sea and the entrance to Ursula's lair. And now here's the model of Ursula and Kiss the Girl and our finale again. Also part of our three-dimensional explorations is obviously the sculpture, because now we've gone into production. This is something that a lot of people don't get to see usually, is our sculpture process going on. We have many, many people, many great sculptors working on it. Off on the right side there, that is our good friend Scott Goddard, who is one of our secret weapons at Imagineering.
Scott carved almost the entire rockwork portion of the 1 inch scale model. He sculpted a lot of the small maquettes, and he sculpted full-size Ariel, he sculpted the full-size Ursula. His hands touched, I think, more of the show and how it came together, and he's done a lot of work on other Mermaid properties that we've developed, so he's got a great hand for it.
So every single character needs to be developed this way.
You see the center.
I'll go back. Sure.
You go to see the Eric. You can see the little tiny Eric, 1 inch to the foot maquette down by his foot. So you know those models. We take those models to our production. You know, when we're building things, they usually that particular facility had the big model in their possession. So there's constantly reference to all these pieces.
There's an interesting story about how we made that statue too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so here's it's a good one. So, okay, how many people have been to Tokyo Disney Sea? Okay, so it's a good one. All right, so you've been to Mermaid Lagoon?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a trivia question. So you see Eric standing there with his leg up. Do you remember that sculpture from?
Ariel's photo in the playground.
Okay, what knee was up?
So, and in the movie, the other knee is up.
And so this is one of those using new technology. So that sculpture was scanned, and we had it in a 3D model. And when we were staging it, it just didn't make sense for his other leg to be up because it would be blocking him, and the stages didn't look right. So we actually took the 3D model and hit the reverse button, and it changed his leg to the other side. But then it also changed the part on his hair to the other side. And so we got all the way into this phase, and we thought they had kept the head the same, but they hadn't, and so the part was on the other side, and we already had him sculpted. Frank's going to kill me, but anyways, we cut his head off. And we scanned a new head with the part on the right side and popped it back on. You might see the little line. I'm not trying to be macabre. This is a production detail.
That's great.
So, talking about newer technologies, this attraction took advantage of some of the newer things that we're doing with scanning in particular. We were able to take our first full-size sculpted Ariel and scan her and then do all of our mechanical work in the computer before actually building her. And this is something kind of new for building our figures. It was kind of new ground that we were exploring, and it really worked out rather well. The little figure of Eric down there in the corner was a grown item. We've been using these new three-dimensional printers to actually print something. Yeah, rapid prototyping. And the little rotating Ariel there, that came from Theme Park Productions. You probably know that sometimes when we do an attraction, we will jump between a projected image of a character to a dimensional character, and we always want to make sure that they look the same, and that's sometimes hard to do. This time we actually took our scan of our sculpture of Ariel and used it for the production of our CGI work in the attraction, so we know that they match. And that's the result right there. So we knew that they looked exactly alike.
So I'm going to talk about the head again.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like a familiar theme, but the sculpting process for the full-size Ariels, we actually used the same head on every one of them. So they were sculpted in an order, but literally the same head just got taken off and put on a new body. So you got the seated Ariel, that's the same head, same one in scene 4.
Right, and the expression was sculpted different, but the eyes were left
But the basic size of the head and the eyes and everything. So that she'd look
for us also.
She'd look the same.
This was something new. Lisa, you tell the story so well.
I do.
Yes, please do.
So we ripped apart. So the eyelids, if they would have been mechanical, the eyelid would have jumped up the top of his head, right? Because it's just a tiny, those little eyeballs are tiny. And trying to get expressive pupils and eyelids and what have you, we've been experimenting with projection for eyes for a lot of different characters over the years. So the challenge here was to try to find a small little screen that we could put in there. And what this actually is it's cell phone projector image technology. We ripped apart a cell phone and shoved it in there, and then had to figure out how to have the mechanism for the mouth and this screen with the ribbon that has to go down for the data to come through, and not have any of that stuff all get tangled and messed up.
And the real estate is as big as my
see how
fist.
tiny it is.
I mean, it's that big.
His little head's like this big, and it's going to get really warm. So we took this 3D file and we sent it to a country that for a small fee will do a rapid prototype out of metal. So that's actually a metal head, so that when the screen gets warm, the little guy doesn't melt.
It was pretty interesting too, because the piece in the Sebastian prototype actually was, he wasn't hooked up to cables. He had to be self-sufficient for those pieces. For his eyes, he had to be kind of self-sufficient within. So I was able to take Sebastian, and he's not that big, and walk around Imagineering and visit all my friends, and he's blinking and he's looking around, and it's pretty amazing because he looks so alive and, blinking away. I actually wanted to take him home.
Now here was another use of new technologies, and on a massive scale too. Just want to show you a comparison here. This is the 1 to 12 model in color, which we scanned.
Yeah, so this
every bit of it.
This is the jump to using 3D models, which in the construction industry there's been a lot of progress over the years. And so what you're seeing in this image, you see all the steel underneath the rockwork, which is the support structure for the rockwork, and you see the scan of the rockwork itself, so the actual panels we build the rockwork out of on top of that, and then we actually imported all of the characters in, you can see the integration. And the big chore here was to make sure that the characters did not interfere with the structural steel, and that was not an easy.
It's the other way around.
Yeah.
The steel doesn't interfere. we
The
get to
characters don't interrupt the structural.
Yeah.
Did I say it the other way?
Well, it was like this. we make the steel guys and the facility guys move their stuff so we can get our little characters
Well, so I'm just gonna, I don't mean to step on your story. My role is to stage this stuff. My role is to make sure that this vision maintains intact through this whole process. And again, talk about one of these meetings. The structural steel guys came in with their first pass at all their structural steel, and they had somehow forgotten that there were characters in the show, and there was steel running through the lobsters and the clams, and the little dots are right on the page, and it shows the steel going right through them, you know. And I look at this engineer and go, dude, you're going to move that steel, they're not going to go through those lobsters. You know, and they look at you like you're kind of funny, and he's looking at me, I'm not kidding. You're going to have to redesign this whole thing because you just wiped out like half the show, and I'm not going to have that. So my job was to make sure that when we got to the field, that when those guys show up, that I don't have to go to some project manager and say, you're going to have to like take a torch and like wipe out all the steel. They don't want to hear that. So this was a big challenge, and it took a lot of coordination, and I'm happy to say there was some secondary steel that had to get moved because for some reason the lobsters were like, I had to move steel around those guys like 3 times because the structural just, I mean the secondary steel kept going through the lobsters. I kept going with those. There's 5 lobsters around here.
And this scene in particular was the most challenging, obviously, because out on the show, this has the most characters. There's 128 characters crammed into this scene. That's if you count every little starfish. And there's 50 of those, so.
The starfish, you know, as innocent as they look. Can you go back a slide? Sure. You see the starfish up on the arch? There's a little can that holds the motor on it, and we had to make sure that they fit. Again, it was real tight. It was probably one of the harder ones up by the structure for the arch going over. That those cans didn't fit, and sometimes, you know, Larry wanted them a particular way, and it's like we're just like nestling these things in between all the steel. It was a lot of fun.
And I'm glad you told that story. I didn't mean to prod you on it, but I'm glad you told it because it's a really important story about working with all the facility folks who are, you know, so valuable too. Because without their facility that they build with us, there's no show to put in there, or there's no place to put the show. However, and sometimes, you know, we joke that, you know, we're kind of spoiled rotten working in Imagineering. Which we are, but the point, and we have a couple of construction folks out here in the audience. Thanks, Peter, for letting us make your life miserable. But the point is, everything, and everybody knows this. Construction folks, everybody that works on a project knows the most important thing is the guest experience. And at the end of the day, no one's going to care, you know, in this room, that, you know, the steel had to be moved. What's important is the steel moved, you know, and you get to have the best show that you can have. So these, you know, these very interesting meetings that happen and the interesting conversation when you've got, you know, some construction managers have come from, you know, building, you know, hospitals, malls, things like that, and then all of a sudden they're talking about, you know, Ursula's tail, or, you know, talking about, you know, bubbles or things like that, and it's serious business. But that's what we mean when we go to the nth, you know, detail and the nth degree to get the show exactly the way that we need it for the guests, which are you.
So the next slide.
When you do a 1-inch model, at that point, we're working with a lot of people where you're making decisions about where everything goes. Yeah. So if you look at the little turtle up on that little pedestal right there, surrounded by all the starfish, there's a mechanical base for the turtle, and then underneath that there's a speaker that's about this big.